Hello and welcome to our tutorial. So this is what we did in class today and what we will do in class tomorrow. So a crossover. So what we started with Blender, and this tutorial is about moving animations from Blender into Unity. So, and I might do this in two parts. I might just do a short piece about what we did today and then do a separate video about what we're going to do tomorrow. So I was going to start by turning on my screencast keys so you can see what I'm pressing, and I'm going to go S, point 1, enter. So I was making this nice and small, and I'm going to go into edit mode and wireframe, and I'm just going to make a very simple first person rig. So I'm going to go E, extrude, and S, and E. So it's going to make something that is, in a very crude and approximate way, a little bit like a finger. But we are not trying to make a beautiful, lifelike hand or anything approaching that. So that's a very basic sort of finger type shape. Let's see, we'll go from the top, so that's the top there, so we'll go E, escape, scale it in, move it down a little on Z, extrude it up, and extrude that out a little bit, and scale it back. And then to this wondrous creature we will add a subdivision surface modifier. We'll select it all, we'll set it to be smooth. We'll delete this back face here, and we will add a loop cut to here and scale that on Y, and take that guy there and go GX. Okay, so that is our finger. Now we are going to look at that from the side, and before we start duplicating it, I'm just going to take that bit there, and I'm going to rotate it, and then go G and place it there, and then take all of that and rotate it and place it about there. So our fingers are, not straight, which is what we want. Okay, so I'm going to select all of that and go Shift D, G, Y, and we'll just scale this one up a little bit. Place it there, Shift D to duplicate, and scale it back. And go Shift D here, and we'll scale that down as our little finger. And then finally we want to make our thumb. So I'm going to draw a box around there, and I'm in edge select mode. That would explain everything. So there and there. And we'll delete a little bit of that in a second. So we'll go Shift D, place this here, and we'll rotate that 90 degrees, but then bring it back a little bit. And rotate that way, and bring it to there. Now we'll take this outside loop, and we'll delete those vertices. Okay, so that's, very crudely a very simple hand. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and W bridge edge loop. Oops. W bridge edge loop, and do the same here. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and this is basically going to be a first-person rig when we bring it into Unity. So what we're trying to do here is select the outside of the hand area. We don't want any of this internal geometry selected, any faces or edges on the inside, because if we extrude them out, we'll have internal geometry in our hand, which is definitely not desirable. So we'll go extrude and scale, but we'll be careful not to scale it too much on Z, so we'll scale it back on Z, and then we'll extrude back and scale, and this time we will go spacebar to sphere. Now we might need to fiddle with this manually just a tad, and like I said, this is not in any way optimized, or anyone who does any modeling who's watching what I'm doing will be horrified. So I'm going to go SX0, straighten it all up, which is also horrific, but for what I want to do, it's just fine. So I'm going to go E, escape, S, and E, and S. Bring this back a little bit on X, and then we're going to extrude, scale it in, and extrude, and scale it back out. Rotate that a little bit, and this is going to be our elbow. Extrude to here, and scale it, and extrude up to here, and scale. Okay, so very crude, rudimentary, ill-shaped arm, but we need to have something to work with. So, yes, this looks like it's from a bad cartoon, and I am so tempted to go in and fix it, but that's not what this tutorial is about. But my OCD is going to make me just do a little bit. And put that there. Okay. That's horrific. Anyway, so we're not really gonna I just wanted to get the hand in a mild holding position, so I might just look at that thumb again. I want to make a gap. So what I really want to do is get that loop there. I'm going to turn on proportional and editing and go G, and then okay. So we just want to make a gap there so we can put in the next tutorial we're going to pick up a weapon and put in there. Okay, so what do I want to do with this? So I'm going to rotate it on X by, whoops, rotate on X by 90. Now, I'm just going to put in a really kind of rudimentary, really simple rig. So I'm going to call this arm. I'm going to click here and I'm going to add in a single bone, and I'm going to take the tip of it and go G, and bring it to the elbow, bring it to the wrist, and bring it to the hand. Now all I'm trying to do is illustrate moving from Blender to Unity with animations. So I should, put a rig in for the fingers and put inverse kinematics, etc. in, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to try and keep it nice and simple. So here is our very rudimentary rig. We're going to rename this armature. We'll call it FPS rig. I'm going to delete this camera and delete this light because I don't need them. I'm going to select the mesh, shift select the skeleton, Control P with automatic weights. And now what we should get is a very simple scenario where we can rotate the hand, and rotate the forearm, and rotate the arm. Okay, so when we're moving from Blender to Unity, we have to remember that transformations don't go across, so like basic movement of an object from one position to another, or rotation or scale, you have to do that inside of Unity. We can't do shape key animation, although I think there are plugins that'll let us do that. So this is the type of animation, if we want the characters to move, that we have to use to bring them across. So I'm just going to do two very simple animations here. I'm just going to do an idle cycle. So I'm going to select all my bones, go insert keyframe on location, rotation and scale, and I'm going to make this idle cycle 200 frames long. I'm going to have the start frame and the end frame be the same, so I've keyframed frame 1 and I've keyframed frame 200, and then I'm very simply just going to, for my idle cycle, just, oh, actually I should have, I'm going to lose what I've done there now. I'm going to go to about frame 120. Do that again, so I'm just going to rotate this in, rotate this ever so slightly, and that's all we're going to do. So something very subtle that can play away, and you know, the player will notice that there is an animation, but the animation is not intrusive. Okay, so that's our idle cycle, and then from frame 200, so I'm going to go to frame 200 here, and I'm going to go to frame 200 and say 20, and insert a keyframe. So I'm remembering this position as well, so this is a cycle, and we'll change this from being 250 long to 220. Now I was going to do a very quick, like a firing animation, as if I were firing a gun, because we're going to, in the next tutorial, pick up a gun. So in class what we actually did was we did sort of like a slap with a hand, so I'm going to do this slightly differently. So, so somewhere around here we're going to be fully extended and firing the gun. So I'm going to rotate this up, so I can extend my arm, and extend it inwards ever so slightly, turn it up that way, and that's going to be the position that we fire the gun in. So I'm going to remember that. Now there's normally a little bit of recoil when we shoot, so what we'll do is we'll copy this current position, move on a frame or two and paste, and have this sort of kick up, move back a little bit and kick up, and have our hand kick up just a little bit, and then it should reset. So if I just play from 200 to 220, that's going to be my animation. Now again, it's very crude, but what we're interested here in here is just the transfer of information into Unity from Blender. So not good, but enough for this exercise. You can refine that yourself. Okay, so a couple of things. We should really name things correctly. So we'll call this bone, we'll call it arm. We'll call this forearm, and we'll call this one hand. And I'm just going to save this to my desktop. I'm going to go save as, and I'll call it, go to desktop, we'll call it FPS rig. Okay, so done. Now I haven't put any materials or textures or any of that stuff on. There is actually a default material on the mesh that came with Blender over in Cycles here by default. I'll say use nodes, and I'll just call this skin. It's just going to be grey though. So save that again, and then we'll exit Blender. So the next part of this is in Unity. So I want to go into Unity here. So I want to go into Unity 2017. I think it's 0.3.1 is the version we have in the college. And we're just going to set this up very quickly to use this script here. Again, this is a script we use in the college today. And this rig that we've made. So we'll very quickly go into Unity. We'll create a new, we'll call this new project FPS rig. And we'll go create project. And I will drink tea while that is loading. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build very basic world, this little white box world, and put a first person rigid body rig that comes into standard assets into that world, and we're going to drop our blend file in and our script and just get them to work, and then we'll set up and so I suppose the interesting part of this tutorial is to set up the Mechanim system, which is the name of the animation system in Unity. So set up the animation controller, animator controller, and get everything to talk. So here we go. I don't know if my machine is getting slower or if Unity is getting slower. So there's a couple of very basic things before we begin. So this is a PC build, so we haven't got this set up to be a Android or anything build. So I'm just going to close this services window. I don't need that, and I don't need lighting for now or navigation, so we'll get rid of them. And I'm just going to say over here free aspect so I can see everything. So here I am in Unity, and let's add a couple of things in. So first thing, let's go import package characters, and the main part of this we want is the first person characters. So we want characters, we don't want cross-platform input, and we don't want physics materials, and we don't want utilities, although some of them are excellent. And we'll just import, let's see, anything we really want, so turn off all that and all that, and we don't want audio. Okay, so import. So we're just looking for a prefab. So the prefab we want is in characters and first person characters prefabs, and that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to drag and drop that into my game, into my world. There it is there. And I'm going to delete my main camera. And the reason I'm going to do that is because inside of this prefab is a main camera, and we don't want to. Next of all, I'm going to go 3D object plane. So I'm going to create a ground plane. Now, because I had this selected, it's created the plane inside of the rig, which is not what we want. So it's going to drag and drop it outside. And I'm going to rename this ground. Okay, and I'm just going to drop this to say -1 on the y-axis, so it's below the character. So if we play this game, I hit play now. Oh, I have a compiler error already. Oh, lots and lots of compiler errors. What have I got? I didn't import enough. So let's do that again while we're fixing things. So characters, and we'll just import the rest. So what happened there was the FPS rigid body controller needed other components that I had not imported, and then it gave us a litany of things are missing. So I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, easily fixed. So I have my ground plane here. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so we can just move around a little. And then I'm going to import my blend file. Now when I import the blend file, Unity will convert it, without consulting me at all, to an FBX file. So let's hit play, and now we can play. So now I can look around, I can use my keys to move around and fall off the edge of the world. There we go, very good. So I have my ground. Let's make that a bit bigger. So I'll say, scale by 5 and by 5. Very quickly we'll make, so we'll create a material and we'll call this ground, so everything isn't so white, and we'll just change very basically, we'll give it a grey colour, and we'll drag that onto the ground, and there it is, just so it's a little bit easier on the eye. Now we're going to import our script, so we're going to go import new asset, and it's on my desktop, and that's it there. Now I'm just going to open this very quickly so you can see it, and copy it if you please. So this is a very simple script, and it doesn't do very much. All it does is addresses animation, and it uses Boolean logic, which is if something is true or false, so sort of like a yes or no, almost kind of like a binary operation. Now there are other versions of or other more complex kind of iterations of Boolean logic, of nans and nors and all that, but for what we're doing a very simple is it true, is it false, so you can see it in there. So I'm just going to open this in MonoDevelop, and we're going to, so all I'm saying here is I've got an animator, or an animator controller, and that's you'll have different animation controllers for your different characters or your different prefabs. In update, I'm saying if I press the fire button, then set the fire animation to be true. This is a parameter that we'll create, and then I say here if any key is false, so if nothing is being pressed, then set idle to be true, so that's the idle cycle, and set fire to be false. We don't actually really need that one, but we'll leave it there. So that's my script. Now I'm going to import, so import new asset, and I'm going to import my blend file. So as I said, when you import this, it'll take a second or two, depending on the complexity of the blend file, and it will give us all sorts of stuff here. So it's going to open this file. There's the arm that we made, the FPS rig, the material called skin. This is actually mesh data, you can see it down there, and then these are our animations. So let's go and sort this out. So first thing is we called our skeleton FPS rig, and any animation that goes on that by default will be called FPS rig action, and we never renamed it. So we'll go to default take, and we're going to say that that should be an animation from this rig, and we're going to call this fire, when we're going to fire our gun. And we want that animation to start on frame 200 and end on frame 219, and we don't want it to loop. And the other one, so this one, is to start on frame 0, but not to go to 219, it should go to 200. And in fact it should actually go to 199, because the first frame and the last frame are the same. So, and otherwise we'd have a repeat of one frame, so we'd have like a little kind of skip or a little glitch in the animation. And we do want this one to loop, because we want the idle cycle to play over and over again. So I'm just going to pull down this slider here and hit apply. And it has changed the things we've asked it to change. So fire is from 200 to 219, it's not looped. And this FPS rig action is 0 to 199. We should probably rename this idle, so we know exactly what it is. So to do that, I need to, I need to apply. Okay, so now you can see over here that we've got fire and idle. These are our two animations that are in our blend file. So now what I want to make is I want to make an animation or an animator controller, and we'll call this FPS control. And I'm going to double click on it, and here it is here. And we did this in class. I'm scrolling on my middle mouse wheel, and I'm in 2017.2, and we're in college in 2017.3. And when you roll on your middle mouse wheel, you zoom in and zoom out. And I don't. So I was pondering that with you earlier. Anyway, I am glad they have made that change because it's very annoying. So this is my controller. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my idle cycle and drag and drop it in here, and then take the fire and drag and drop that in here. So these are my two animations, and I want to be able to control them. Now by default, the one you bring in first is sort of the first thing that will be played. So I can make this the first thing that's played. It's identified as being orange in color. It's actually the idle cycle I want to be the first to play. So entry goes to idle, and I'm going to make transition, and then from fire I'm going to make a transition here. Sometimes you won't want a transition, like if you have an animation that is like a death cycle, so a character dying, you don't want after they're dead to be able to then walk again. That would not make sense, or maybe it would, depending on the game you're creating. But anyway, in this context here, we want to be able to switch between the two of these. Now in our script we made reference to Boolean operations, so let's go fix them. So I'm going to go plus here. Oh, no I'm not. I'm going to delete that there. I'm in layers here. I'm going to go to parameters and hit plus, and I want to make a Boolean parameter. And the first one I'm going to make is idle, I-D-L-E, all in small letters. I just want to jump back to monodevelop because the spelling is very important. So I have fire and idle, and they can be true or false. So at the moment it's set to be false. I'm going to make another Boolean. I'm going to call it fire, and it's also at the moment false. Now when I click on these transitions, so when does it go from idle to fire? Well, if we look at our script, we press the button and we set it to be true. So I'm going to say when fire is true, go from idle to fire. Now I'm going to turn this off here, has exit time. So what we don't want is we want when the player presses the button, the fire button, we want it to fire. We don't want it to wait until all of the animation is played and then fire. We want it to have no exit time. This one here, on the other hand, we do want to play to the end of the animation before it goes back. And this one should be when idle is true. So when idle is true, so that means we're not pressing a key, go back to the idle animation, but play the end of the fire animation first. When idle is being played and then we press the fire button, so fire is true, we're going to play the fire animation, but we're not going to wait until the idle animation is finished. So that's our basic setup here. So now what we have to do is we have to position our rig and get it to work in the game. So I'm going to take this blend file and drag and drop it in here, and it has placed it very close to my camera. So I'm going to go to rotate it around that way. Actually, let's just look at the camera and see what way it's facing. So the camera's looking at that way, so we're pointing in the right direction here. So minus 87, so might as well round that off to minus 90. And then I'm going to go back to move. I'm going to move this rig forward and a little bit to the right. And it's probably a little bit too big, so we'll scale it to say 0.5. And we'll tweak the position of it a little bit. Now, I'm going to go to my camera here, and I'm just going to set the clipping all the way back to 0.1. That just means that anything that's very close to the camera won't be cut off. It'll still be shown. And then, this is one of the important bits, I'm going to take the FPS rig and drag and drop it on top of the camera. So now it's the child of the camera. So when the camera moves, it will also move. So let's press play. And my hand, even though it can go through the ground, we can worry about fixing that in a moment, moves with the camera. Now, let's get this script working. So I'm going to drag and drop the script onto the rig, and it says it's looking for the animator. So that is the animator there, and that is, just in case you're wondering where did that come from in our script, there we go. In order to access these Boolean, is it true, is it false, fire, etc., we have to be able to go, well, which controller are we talking about? So when I press the fire button, is the non-player character firing, is the player character firing, is the boss firing, etc. So which animator controller are we referring to? So that's the variable there. And we did that in college, and it didn't work because we forgot to set this one up here, the controller. So we need to say FPS controller. That's the controller that we should be using. And when I press play, now I'm not doing anything with the mouse, I'm just holding or being still. So that's the idle cycle playing there, and it's playing through on a loop. And when I press my left mouse button, I fire, and then I go back to the idle cycle. Fire, 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 and then back to the idle cycle. So that's how you transfer animations from Blender into Unity. It's quite simple. If you have more than 2 animations, 3, 4, 5, you can just add them in over here. You have to set which frame, and then that is, I suppose, predicated on you when you are, if I select the rig here, when you're in Blender, that you keep all of the animations on one timeline, so that you're not creating lots of different animations here. It's just one big long timeline, and you remember the frames. Now you don't have to do that. You can actually drag. There's a drop down menu here. You can pick which animation you want to use, but I find that the easiest to do. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. So this is working. And this is basically where we finished up in class, and then this is 32 minutes long, or 33 minutes at the moment. So I'm going to stop this tutorial now. So this is basically what we covered in class, and then the next tutorial, which I'll record now, is just to get a gun or an object to appear in the hand of this character, and then have another one lying on the ground, and then as we walk over to it, to pick up the new one and swap it for the one that we have in our hand. So we'll have a look at how do we do that.